All right, guys, so we're going to do part one of graphing sine and cosine functions. So lots of graphs coming up over your next couple of days. Here we go. First of all, when you start graphing these things, this is what a graph of the first graph you see down here. I'm skipping the table for a second. That's the graph of sine. That's the graph of cosine. You notice they look a lot alike. One's just been shifted over a little bit. And the way we get those graphs is we plot these points. And if you notice these points that we picked, like we picked negative 2 pi, negative 3 pi over 2, those are those points on the axis, on the x and y axis. And all of our sines and cosines are zeros and ones. So when we start drawing the graph, you're going to see a whole lot of pi over 2 is pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi, and negative being the same way. Negative pi over 2, negative pi, negative 3 pi over 2, negative 2 pi. And what happens is because sine is 0, at 0, you go there. Sine of pi over 2 is 1, it goes up. Sine of pi is 0. Sine of 3 pi over 2 is negative 1. Sine of 2 pi is 1. And it just repeats. Now, that right there is called one cycle of sine. The word they use for cycle is period. That's one period. So the whole graph, one whole cycle takes place between 0 and 2 pi. Then it just starts over again and does the same thing. Also goes backwards this way. Okay, so the period of sine is 2 pi. Cosine's the same way, except this is the case. At 1, cosine is also 1. At pi over 2, it's 0. At pi, it's negative 1. At 3 pi over 2, it's 0. 2 pi. So it's the same deal. That's also a period right there. But instead of beginning at 0 and ending at 0, it starts at 1, ends at 1. Starts over again, does the same thing again. Starts over here, does the same thing again. All right, but that's how the graphs look. That's what they're going to look like the next couple of days. Some characteristics. Domain is all real numbers. They go left and right forever. They never stop. They just keep on going. The range is going to be between negative 1 and positive 1. If you remember that graph over there, the biggest thing it went to was 1 and negative 1. The amplitude, we're going to talk about that in a second. That's a big deal for tomorrow. Periodic, or the period, is a big deal. Same thing as cycle. It just means like when does it start repeating itself. And the x-intercepts, where does sine cross the x-axis? At all the pi's. Where does cosine cross the x-axis? All the pi over 2's. If you can get that, that's a big deal. Make things easy for you. Okay, here's what we're talking about today mainly, amplitude and period. Amplitude is kind of like height. It tells you how far and how high and how low the graph goes from the middle. So like cosine did this. Cosine was up here at 1, negative 1, 2, 3, 4. That was 2 pi, that was 1 pi. And cosine did this. Cosine did this right here. All right, it also obviously kept on going in both directions, but that was one cycle or one period, which we're going to talk about in a second. First of all, amplitude is always positive. That's what says absolute value of A. And also amplitude means how far did you go from the middle of your graph. Like here's the midline. The midline of that graph is the x-axis. How far up did we go? How far down did we go? 1. And that's the amplitude. If there's amplitude is A when you see a graph or an equation. A is in front of the sine or cosine. If you see nothing there, the amplitude is 1. That graph right there is just y equals cosine x. Okay, there's a 1 right there, so it means it went up 1, down 1. Period is how far it takes before it starts repeating, before the graph starts repeating. Usually, if it's just like this, it's 2 pi. However, if there's a number right in front of the x, remember, think about that. We used to do, say that was a horizontal shrink or stretch based on what that number was. And trig, they call it a period. So it's always 2 pi divided by b. 2 pi divided by b. Let me show you a couple. Okay, this one says identify the amplitude and period of 4 sine x. Okay, the amplitude is always A, whatever's in the front. There's a piece of cake to find it. The period is always 2 pi divided by b. Now b is whatever's in front of the x. This time there's a 1 in front of the x, so it's just 2 pi. So there's the period, there's amplitude, which means if we're going to graph sine, that's 2 pi. That's the period is how far you go. And the amplitude is 4, so I got to go all the way up to 4 and all the way down to negative 4. Sine starts at 0. Goes like this. So one period of sine will look just like that. I'll show you one more. So identify the amplitude and period of fx is 1/2 cosine. That's supposed to be a pi. I don't have a pi button on my iPad, so it's the best I could do. 2 pi x. So first of all, amplitude is going to be whatever's in front, which is a 1/2. That's the amplitude. Absolute, I should say absolute value was in the front. Period is always 2 pi divided by what's in front of x. This time, there's a 2 pi in front of x. If you do 2 pi divided by 2 pi, it's 1. So that's the period. So if we were to graph that one, you're just going to go up to 1/2 and down to 1/2, negative 1/2 on the y-axis. Still going to go our 4 slashes, but instead of it being 2 pi, I'm just going to 1, which means that's a half. Because it's cosine, cosine doesn't do that. Cosine starts at this time 1/2 instead of 1. So the graph 1 period will look just like that. All right, hope that makes some sense. We'll work on it a lot tomorrow and the next day. So see you then.